All right, everybody, welcome to a special episode of Cyberbulls. Today, we're going to discuss how politics might matter with Tesla. So if you're interested in Tesla or if you're an investor in Tesla, no matter how you slice it, right, government policies can and will affect the future of the company. I'm hoping that this discussion will, it's not going to have a winner or loser for either the Democrat or Republican side, but rather this is about education and learning. So today we have our bulls with us. We have Alexandra Merz and Jeff Lutz, and we're joined by Rohan Patel. So Rohan was previously an executive at Tesla as Vice President of Global Public Policy and Business Development. He did that for 7 years. And prior to that, he was at the Obama White House for 5 years in charge of intergovernmental affairs and senior advisor for climate and energy, an additional 5 years before that. So the three main topics we want to talk about today is first, the policies associated with autonomous vehicles, tariffs and unions. And if we have time, we'll also talk about lawfare. Thank you, everybody. Welcome.
Great to be here.
Welcome, Rohan. So happy to have you.
Thanks. The way that Herbert
matches on X, right?
Well,
what do you want to say?
No, I was just going to say, the way that you set that up with sort of the Democrat versus, who's going to win, it almost felt like, you remember that old CNN show that Carville and Bagala and used to...
Crossfire?
Yes.
Crossfire. I used to hate that damn show. But honestly, I think as we get into these topics, this is kind of my nature anyways, even despite what you see on X. I think I'm probably going to sadly agree with Jeff and Alexandra a hell of a lot more than maybe you're hoping for.
And I think they are as well. So that's really my position here, is just to learn, because, I can hear one thing from somebody saying this and they're saying that, and you got the three smartest people here. So just to kick it off, just to, loosen it up a little bit, Alexandra, why don't you ask some questions about Rohan and find out more about his background?
Sure. With pleasure. First question I have, Rohan, is how was it last Thursday to watch We Robots? Not being there, seeing how far they are now, how did you experiment it?
Well, I experienced it over text message, being super jealous and being just, there's a lot that can be said substantively, and maybe we can get into some of that, but I think the vision that is being set out is just fantastic. It's where things need to go, and it's fine. I think it's totally fine for investors and experts and others to quibble with all the various different specifics that may exist. But to my mind, it's an extraordinary vision and a set of technologies that I think the world needs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was great. We were there, all three of us, and it was spectacular. All of us have been to prior Tesla events, and there's nothing to be taken from the old ones, but this one's really, really very, very special. So where I wanted to really start is with your beginning of the career, because even before you worked for Obama in the White House, you were already in politics. Did you move straight into politics after your studies, and what was the motivation for wanting to serve in this rather than in the industry, right?
No, whenever I talk to college groups, or I'm doing a lecture at a university or something, I always tell them, please do not follow my path. It makes no sense. It's all over the map. It really, I was music performance, violin performance major in college at Northwestern. I went to Northwestern partly because my dad was like, I'll help you pay for your school, but you need to go somewhere where you can actually take other stuff other than be a violinist. That's not gonna be your career, basically. So I did that. Was a pre-med. I did all my pre-med requirements and whatnot. Was ready to go to medical school, and yeah, the political itch was really like a summer on the couch with a buddy of mine and staying at my cousin's place, drinking beer and volunteering. And I ended up getting to know a number of folks in the Obama Political Action Committee and Obama Orbit. And one thing leads to another. And I'm not not fulfilling my dad's dream of me becoming a doctor. I luckily did marry a doctor, so I didn't fully
trade.
disappoint the family.
Started the trading game. You see, you're getting like Trump, always transactional.
Exactly.
So you worked more or less in the Obama orbit for about 10 years, including obviously the last 7 or 8 years in the White House. And then you switched to Tesla. So what was that a desire to, I mean, obviously his presidency came to an end after the 2 terms, to go into the industry and to go to Tesla? What was your main motivation at that very moment to change from politics to the industry?
Oh, well, the holy grail for any energy nerd, and I consider myself an energy nerd, is storage. Whether that's mobile storage or stationary storage. We've been at lots of different types of technologies over the years. Tesla, I thought, apart from all of the excitement and all of the amazing, the look of the car, the performance of the car, the amazing allure of Tesla, the storage component and the power electronics of the company are what stood out even back then. I remember thinking to myself, holy crap, if anybody's going to be able to figure out how to get more renewables on the grid, it's going to be these guys. And I went out, there was sort of a typical recruiting thing, did about 10 interviews, and Elon was supposed to be the last one. My resume's on the table. He walked in, looked at my resume, and then walked out. And so I thought, oh shit, must not have liked my resume, or I don't know. Looking around for the recruiter. Yeah. Well, so I'm like, where the hell did the recruiter go? Hour later, the recruiter comes back, assuming that things had gone well. Like, well, no, he left. Didn't hear back from Tesla for a month. Turns out, and then they said, oh, Elon wants to talk to you. Can you meet him in space at the SpaceX side in DC? He's going to be in DC. It's like, sure. What happened the last time though? Like, I thought things went pretty well with everybody else. Yeah. Things went well. He had to go down to LA because one of his kids got into a playground accident or something. Oh, okay. Well, here I was thinking my resume sucked. So, so that was the sort of Tesla story. And I mean, touring the Fremont factory, meeting with a number of the engineering leads and other leadership, it felt like a campaign. Like,
Again?
The Obama campaign, it was like this set of people that were just so goddamn committed. I mean, just so motivated. Whether you hated the Obama team or you loved them, you could respect the fact that there was a real serious sense of motivation. And you felt that in spades in talking to the Tesla team and the leadership there. It was you certainly felt that. And in my first week, I was already washing cars. It was also that kind of sense of everybody's got to pitch in on everything.
Great. So you then lived the 4 years under President Trump as business development, including obviously the US, and now the last 3.5 years under President Biden. Can you, as a business developer, really distinguish the 2 parts? Did you feel that one administration helped Tesla more than the other, or one blocked initiatives more than the other?
Well, let me preface that by saying it's a good question, but it's not so much on the business development side. Now, my business development title, partially, it really helped me at Tesla because in part, Elon would, whenever he was introducing me to someone, it would be as Rohan is my business development guy, which I'm thinking to myself, I don't have a lot of business development background. In fact, I had zero. I don't know anything about business acquisition, corporate development, partnership potential for Tesla or for all of the complex things. But it was very helpful because his mindset about government was that that we should not be sitting around having, cocktails with congressional members or governors or whoever the hell else. Now, the point here is actually to develop our business, whether with non-dilutive capital or with other different types of ventures. So that's the reason for the title. It's not so much.
So how would you have called it? More strategy, or what? How would you have given yourself a title?
In retrospect, I love the title. At the beginning, I think most people would call it something like corporate strategy, or maybe some combo of government relations and corporate strategy, or they lots of companies use different terms, and people like me at other companies have different types of titles. But yeah, the thing I would say in terms of differentiation is more on the hardcore pieces of the pollution regulations, the industrial policy differences, the way in which one administration versus the other was thinking about those items. On the whole, I mean, I wouldn't say that either administration was particularly, let's help Tesla figure out its export-import bank issue or some other thing. I don't think either administration was particularly helpful on those fronts. Does that make sense? So it's more, and I've detailed some of these out in previous X posts. I mean, happy to go through. You guys are experts on this at this point, so I don't think there's a need to go through all the various different.
No. I mean, I think we all agree the IRA was very helpful. Although I already have the feeling that some of it is already, dying in bureaucracy, and some of the battery plans that were supposed to come are finally not coming and whatever. But I mean, it was by far the best initiative of the Biden administration. And whether it was targeted to Tesla or not, Tesla did profit from it. There is no doubt about it. And I did like what I heard from you on Farzad's podcast about discussing China, and how China is actually so much ahead of Europe and the United States when it comes to overcoming bureaucracy and just getting the job done. And so do you still feel that's the case now? Do you still feel that there is this, bureaucratic blockage? I think it's even more in Europe than in the US, but I'll let you obviously answer the question. You know where I come from.
You know that, Alexandra. Yeah.
That's why I left.
Yeah. Yes, there is. I wouldn't discount the amount of bureaucracy and corruption that exists in China as well. It's a sort of it's an easy way out type of thought process. People in India love to. Bureaucrats in India love to talk about this as, well, if we were China, we could just wave the magic wand and everything. That's not really the case. You've got provincial issues, you have city level issues, mega city level issues. There's plenty of bureaucracy that exists also in China, and corruption levels that also exist in China. So, but the ability to get big projects done is, I think, unmatched. There may be a few other places that are doing it just as well, or coming up on the heels of China, but the ability to get big things done is unmatched. That part is something we have to be super cognizant of as we think about any types of reforms, any type of efficiency measures, permitting measures, regulatory morass, over-regulation, and yes, and also I think, protectionism that can really get in the way as well. We've seen that in history, where countries, entities get too excited about protectionism, and that really causes competitiveness to wane.
And I think we should get to those tariffs in a second. I just want to push my last question through while I'm there, and then I'll hand it over with pleasure to Jeff. Is, when you were still at Tesla, we were scrutinizing you like crazy. Like, you would post something on Twitter at 2:00, we would go, okay, where is he? Is he in Indonesia? Is he in India? I mean, we were crazy about it. We loved it. I can tell you, there was a whole micro ecosystem around it. So you were obviously spearheading all these international efforts, yet nothing happened. none of those happened. And I'm sure you can't really comment on it, but is it a frustration that these international expansions haven't happened yet? Or do you feel it's actually maybe even the fruit of the IRA that so much is now happening in Austin?
There's some of that, no doubt. Now, that's a hard pill to swallow for these other countries. They have been quite worried about the IRA distorting their ability to land major projects. So that is a big thing. The Japanese and Koreans have been particularly lucky in terms of the IRA, because whether it's Hanwha, Panasonic, LG, Samsung, go down the list, it's a wild array of positives for businesses based in those countries. But yeah, every country has been worried about the IRA in terms of its distortionary impact, just as they are worried about the Chinese distorting a fair and level playing field in terms of trade. So yeah, that's a good one. In terms of the question about expansion and business development, I mean, things change. We did do quite a bit of expansion, as you know, it's quite publicly available, selling vehicles and many other products now into South America. Did a number of countries in terms of market entry that did not exist just a few years back. So the Tesla team is expanding in a significant way on lots of different product levels. In terms of manufacturing, I think that's just a matter of where the investment needs to go. What's the priority at the time? What's the cash position at the time? And where's the necessary, where does that capital need to be allocated? And so, that's also something you guys have talked about, I think, during the We Robot set of discussions and decisions. And so I'm not at all frustrated. I mean, there's plenty of those kinds of, you think about any different type of corporation and all of the corporate strategy and mergers and acquisitions work that happens. If you're in that world, you're looking at 100 companies before you acquire one. And you're looking at 250 properties, and maybe you'll get one, you'll take a flyer on one. And you're looking at, so it's not necessarily a frustration. In fact, it was a lot of fun. And I think we and the Tesla team were able to leverage some of those meetings, discussions, efforts to really positive outcomes for the business and for the products.
Okay.
Let's get right into the three main topics. We'll start first with the policies for autonomous vehicles. That's what kicked off this whole discussion between you and Jeff and Alexandra. We'll get into protectionism, tariffs and unions, and then if we have time, we'll talk about lawfare. So this is what happened, right? On the same day that 1010 happened, the big We Robot event happened, Trump was on and he said a few things about autonomous vehicles. I will play that. You, Rohan, said the Republican Party is no longer the Republican Party. The most protectionist union leaders have not proposed this level of extremely protectionist policies, tagging Jeff. You guys started having a conversation about it. You also said the autonomous vehicle, this is what Trump did say, I'll play it. Autonomous vehicles were going to stop from operating on American roads. You said, imagine the reaction if this was Kamala saying this from the Tesla community. Tesla Boomer Mama would have already started a petition by now. That's funny. But your point was...
You like my petitions.
I really do. I was so, honestly, this is not bluster, and it's not like just blowing smoke. I honestly was like, the thing that Tesla has, I hope it cherishes going forward. Like that when you have people that are out there as talented as Alexandra pulling together a petition and organizing like that, I mean, dude, you have to normally pay like a lot of money, and even after you pay a lot of money, you don't get effectiveness like that in terms of outcomes. So
thank you.
It really,
and I have to tell you on Rohan, which I think will go to your heart. When we did that shareholder vote and we finally learned on that Thursday in Austin that it passed, you sent me, so I was in the middle of the foyer there with all the people with 2,000 attendees at the shareholder meeting, and you sent me that text and saying they are so lucky to have you. I was just standing there and crying because I saw it, and people were like, "What does she have? What's she doing? Why is she crying?" And that was because of you. So there you go.
Touching. All right, let's get back to Trump. I'll play this, and then we'll have you and Jeff talk about this kind of concept. Here's Trump.
Does anybody like an autonomous vehicle? You know what that is, right? When you see a car driving along. Some people do, I don't know. It's a little concerning to me, but the autonomous vehicles, we're going to stop from operating on American roads. Remember this.
So was he talking about just China autonomous vehicles? Was he talking about all autonomous vehicles? Who wants to start between you and Rohan and Jeff?
I'll start. I was tagged as the RNC spokesperson in this one. And I'm not, but yeah, no, I get it. It's a fun exchange. I kind of viewed it as a, again, trying to defend every comment from every candidate. It's going to be pretty tiring from either side. I viewed it as kind of a throwaway line. It could have been about Chinese vehicles, which there are discussions right now about blocking their access to acquire data and operate on our roads autonomously, or it could have been broader, right? Because there is an element here of people that drive vehicles as a service, and then you have this whole service economy. And I believe Trump is speaking to these people, and you're saying things obviously to get elected, and you want to reach out. There's people that are concerned about their jobs and where do they go from point A to point B. Point A right now is they're driving a truck, they're driving a taxi, they're driving an Uber, they're doing something in the service economy. So to put that line, that was clearly probably put in there, as a way to kind of reach out to people, say, hey, I'm looking at this. But obviously I kind of viewed it as more of a throwaway line. Obviously the higher order bit has to be are we going to be safer as a population, and is there inescrutable data that says we're going to be safer with autonomous vehicles? The answer is going to be yes. It's a question of getting over this political hurdle.
Yeah, well, I agree with that. I agree with why also he was probably saying it. It is worth rewinding though. This is not the first time. He is on quite a few occasions talked about autonomous vehicles being death traps. Trump has talked about them not being able to work, that he wouldn't trust getting in behind in a autonomous vehicle. He wouldn't trust a computer to drive him around. So I think it's a mindset. Frankly, it's kind of like my mom's mindset. It's not that disturbing. It's not like a weird, crazy mindset. In fact, it exists.
Careful with the age shaming.
No, my mom. I'm literally talking about my mom, not a general mom. My mom herself has a Tesla and also has FSD, and my dad uses it every day, but she refuses to. So I think it's just a mindset shift that he'll have to go through. But what happens is, and this is where it gets difficult, when the rubber meets the road and there's a really bad incident, what you need is calm, rational leadership at the helm. And yeah, we have regulatory agencies, but they are appointed by and serve at the pleasure of the president. So while there have been a whole range of incidents through the Trump administration and through the Biden administration, in both cases, I think NHTSA leadership, was I annoyed with NHTSA leadership during the Trump years? For sure. Was I annoyed by the Biden NHTSA people? For sure. But they had a general rational understanding and actually believed, and I think Pete Buttigieg for sure, and Elaine Chao as well, really honestly believed that we needed to have an autonomous future. Where the problem lies is that you're going to have problems. Any system is going to have significant problems. So is Trump does Trump have the right mindset to not just make a rash decision when something bad happens, whether it's to Tesla, to Waymo, to Motional, or to some other company? And so that's kind of what I would worry about in terms of his mindset.
Yeah. And it's kind of an appropriate question. The question is like, where is this legislated from, the federal side versus the state side, and how is this rollout? I think there's a lot of questions out there of like, how is this rollout actually going to occur?
Yeah.
But I view that, and this is one of the things I think it would be helpful that, the closer that Elon can be working with, various levels of government, I think there could be some benefit. I think it's unpredictable too at the same time. I mean, it's hard to know like what's being said before an election versus how it would actually work, in a functioning government. But for us as, citizens, hopefully it turns out like, the best set of data wins in this conversation. And hopefully that's how it works, because quite frankly, there's hyperbolic statements on both sides of the aisles. You've got the senators, the two senators, writing letters all the time. Every time they see an FSD incident, they're writing letters. They're working with, people on the outside. And so you've got things happening on both sides. And hopefully, again, the data, wins in the end. But this conversation then transitioned to me. I kind of viewed it as like, all right, he makes this throwaway statement, and then I think there's an automation issue though. It's actually in the DNC platform of almost being anti-automation. If you look at, if it's unions across the board and it's pro-union across the board, I mean, in almost every phase of union development and implementation, they are anti-automation. And to me, like, that is actually the deeper issue, not the throwaway line. I don't think it's in the RNC platform to be anti-automation. So that's where I actually think the bigger concern rested there.
Yeah, I think you make a really solid point, which I also mentioned. I think I said that on Twitter as well, or on X as well. There's a real continuum, and it's worth just pointing out. There's a real continuum in terms of where certain unions are and where others are, and that continuum is important. The ones that have a serious-minded, rational look at the future and want to preserve a seat at the table in a way that can advance their own interests and their members' interests, they're quite understand. I'd put the steelworkers in that bucket as an example. The way that they've negotiated some of their agreements in my region of the country, where I'm from, there's about 10 times less, so 1/10 the amount of workers in the steel industry. There's more steel being produced because of the excellent levels of automation. And so, and other unions, as we've seen, with the dock workers, port workers, longshoremen, quite the opposite, where, I mean, some of the stuff that the leadership of that union was pushing was downright bad for the union members themselves, not just in the short term, in the long term, making some of these ports completely uncompetitive. So that, I think it is worth just pointing out. It's not just a monolith of unions bad, automation good. There's some that really understand this dynamic and are trying to work through it because they've gone through such heavy losses in the past.
Yeah, I agree with that. It just feels like the minority, if you think of the auto union and their stipulations on automation and kind of almost how they're acting anti-EV in some respects. And you think of the recent port strike. I mean, these are two unions that could have had a debilitating effect on the U.S. And I think that's one point of contention. And then the other one, to me, there's just not, and one of the questions is like, which party is better for Tesla? I mean, I think we can get into that conversation. Unfortunately, the answer is going to be, it's going to be quite quite mixed. I mean, I think the green energy platform on the Republican side is a real problem. Like and it needs to be a little bit more out front. This is why we're getting honestly whooped. If you look at the supply chain from a green energy development perspective out of China, the work that they started back, before 2010 on the mineral side, on the mining side, on the refining side. These are things that took, over a decade and a half to develop in the background, and we're kind of like we were not doing much on our side. And I saw this real time when I was, in the manufacturing world. So the answer is it's going to be mixed, but if I were to like lay one thing down there, honestly, I'm really concerned about that. I think the Republican platform needs to figure out, like, this is turning into a competitive disadvantage to be shunning this green energy thing and just calling it kind of a scam. And it's really putting us at a disadvantage. It's going to be almost like we're not going to be able to catch up. I mean, China's already surpassed everyone in exports, and they're surpassing everyone in domestic production. It's going to be a real problem.
Well, the thing I would say, Jeff, that's we have to be careful of hubris. Where the thing that is so damn annoying to me when I hear it is, well, China's just copying and pasting stuff from U.S. labs or DOE stuff. And is that happening? Sure, of course. There is some of that. And in certain industries, that's true. In the processing of minerals, in battery technology, in some of the powertrain components, in many of these aspects of development, they're not just copying and pasting. They have real technology advances and real technology leads. So part of the problem with both the Republicans and Democrats on this point is that what you would do in this case, and what China did so damn smart, and Elon held the line, which was smart of Elon too. We really want you. We really want you. We really want you. Well, we're going to do our own thing. It's going to be 100% owned by Tesla. And so, you want to help us in some other ways, great, but we're going to do our own thing. We're not teaming up with, Great Wall Ventures or some other thing. That's not us. So now look at what it did. It stimulated such a huge amount of innovation. So many different copycats. Some of them have gone by the wayside. Some of them have really emerged, and it's developed out their auto industry. I think Tesla deserves a huge amount of credit. It's still beaten the pants off of the Chinese competition in China. So, and it has a whole bunch of disadvantages, by the way, because the supply chain for the Chinese companies generally quite heavily subsidized. There's a whole bunch of accounting measures that are that completely lack transparency. So loss making below 10 levels deep. So despite that, Tesla China is outcompeting the Chinese in China. Yeah. So, but we should be thinking about this is the way that the Trump or Harris administration should be thinking about this. In certain sectors, it is okay. In fact, it is the right policy to attract Chinese businesses into the United States in terms of investment. It is downright stupid to put our head in the sand and say, well, we'll just develop it out of whole cloth. We don't need any type of Chinese investment or Chinese supply chain, nothing. Hell, we're not even just going to ban Chinese investment. We're going to ban Chinese investment in Mexico, a sovereign nation. That's the mindset.
Well, sovereign nation, but because of the NAFTA, obviously easy to import. It's not as if Mexico is just neutral. No, I mean, it's Mexican-built cars.
Yes. Yeah. It's easy to, but it's the machinations that the Biden team and now the Trump team will also be doing the same thing, that they will have to go through to try to ban Chinese-made cars. And they're going to come up with some doozies. I mean, I've been in all these conversations, and I don't begrudge the thought process there, but it is a path to nowhere. It is a path to uncompetitiveness down the road, because you will be protecting companies that just cannot develop and won't develop because they have
Agree.
a protection.
Agree.
I
That's
think
a whole other
generally
subject. But
dumb.
Tesla Mexico is obviously stalled to wait for the election results. So there is a component of, is it worth manufacturing in Mexico currently or not?
Yeah, but that's like, look, I'm not sure. I don't know what's going through his head at this point. I don't know exactly what the
reasons.
corporate strategy is, but I mean, to be fair, neither the Biden team nor the Trump team would be galactically stupid enough to ban any electric vehicle from coming from Mexico. They're going to try, and I don't know if they're going to be successful, and there's going to be lots of litigation on it if they do. They're trying to scare the crap out of the Chinese automakers to not invest in Mexico for U.S. consumption. They're trying that.
So, Rohan, you're just saying it's another talking point. So here's my understanding. Okay, the Biden administration already finalized the 100% tariffs increase on electric vehicles for China, and then they staying firm in holding firm the bans on years from now the gas cars. Then you've got Trump saying that he's not only going to increase the tariffs from 100%, maybe even to 200%, which is great for the EVs from China, but also Mexico. And he has said we're going to get rid of the bans for the ICE cars as well. Is that not true?
Trump has one, of course, as usual with Trump, there's no detail. So you have no idea what the hell he's talking about most of the time. So on this one, again, same thing. 200% tariffs, 100% tariffs on cars built in Mexico, even if they're Chinese, if it's a Chinese company. Name me a provision in USMCA that allows for that. Name me a provision generally. I know what the provisions are that they're going to try to use. What I'm telling you is that they will be very difficult to promulgate. They will be very difficult to win in court on, because the reason why you have a free trade agreement in the first instance is so that you have protections against this very thing. So that's why this notion and the same thing. I mean, the Biden team, trust me, I tell you, it's not that much different. They also, and this is not like, it's not like the Biden team is sitting around a table, having a great time talking about this issue. No, it's that the U.S. companies that are worried about competition are screaming at them, help us, save us, protect us. That's what's happening. And what gets me about that to a degree is companies that are actually innovating and developing great efficiency and working in a really strong way are the ones that should emerge victorious. Those are not through protectionism, but through competition. So I sound like a goddamn Republican. I can't believe that I'm the one making these points, but that's one of
the objectives by the end of this conversation.
You do, but isn't there the extra notion of actually information accumulation with China, right? Isn't there, and I think we have the same topic for Tesla in China. Isn't there this whole topic of autonomous cars are actually robots on wheels that are constantly sending images of whatever happens to the mothership, and that could be a concern. Would you concede that is a concern in terms of national security?
No, I don't. I think it's kind of a joke. I mean, in fact, I think that's kind of what the Chinese were doing with Tesla, and it was stupid. I mean, it was boneheaded. Like
it's manageable.
The thought process that Tesla, people driving in a Tesla were like taking screenshots, pictures, using the cameras in the car of Chinese government buildings and then sending that back to the CIA. Made no sense. It wasn't a thing. And by the way, there's protections against data coming back over. So there's plenty of protections, even if that weird scenario were to play out. And we're talking about public parking garages in the case of the Chinese regulations that were crazy.
I have a broader point on this whole thing, and what I was saying originally is, I actually think the die has been cast, and the question is there any path to convergence? When I say the die has been cast on this, I go back to the before 2010, the work that China did on the EV supply chain, starting from the raw material level all the way to the sub-assembled components to the battery supply chain. They have the top two battery output manufacturers in the world outputting cells for EVs with BYD and Cattle. And I believe that this has been cast. This happened actually over 2 decades. And the question is, what do we do with it now? Does one administration swallow this pill and say, all right, let them in, and basically it's Game of Thrones, whoever survives, or and do you basically, or do you tariff, and do you have some sort of point of later convergence where Ford respins themselves up, or some of these companies kind of go off and come back as a different identity? Maybe they spin into something new, or maybe they combine forces. But there has to be something dramatic in terms of reforms or realignment within these companies to come back into something in the form of being competitive. And that's what the tariffs could buy. But in order to put the tariffs on, you can't have this conversation on the campaign trail. It's like a lengthy, it's more of like, I got to protect. There's 3 million people tied to the auto industry here. So
yeah,
I hear you on the point of, and I agree with it, of like, let the best win. But then what do you do with the 3 million people? Or do you have a plan for the 3 million people? And I just need buy me 5 years, okay? And here's my plan for convergence here's how the U.S. auto industry reemerges.
So Trump's best point in the debate was a debate that, as you guys saw, didn't look that great for him. But his best point was, hey, what are you talking about here? You continued the tariffs that I set up. I'm the one who set those tariffs up. I'm the one who was put those in place and put China on the defensive, right? So Trump had that point. I thought it was a good one. What Trump did that was smart was to create the room for a rethink of strategy on a number of different fronts and in a number of different industries, not just in this one. But then he followed it up with literally zero industrial policy carrots. He had the stick, but then in order to develop out and support a set of industries in the United States, maybe even with our allies through other means, you need to have some way to kickstart those and give people the confidence, give investors the confidence, give the banking sector the confidence to actually go do these projects and develop these projects. That's what the IRA and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the CHIPS and Science Act, these are Biden administration wins. Some of them were bipartisan. John Cornyn is an example, big CHIPS Act guy. Lots of good bipartisan support in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. But the IRA is the big kahuna here. And that's actually developing out billions and billions and billions of dollars in investment. Now, what we should not do, and what we should have a spine on, a really steely spine, is when there is a company that goes under, and there will be many that were invested in through IRA dollars directly or indirectly through a tax credit, we should not sit back and say, oh my God, Joe Biden, what a loser. How could he do this? He's wasted taxpayer dollars. That's the whole point. What Jeff is arguing for right now is the industrial policy of the IRA. And the industrial policy of the IRA is the kind of thing that we ought to be supporting, nurturing, and figuring out how to make sure that we have the supply chains in place in order to develop out a competitive. Now, you can argue whether or not the battery sector and the electric vehicle sector and the clean tech sector generally is a national security concern. That's actually a good argument to have. You can argue whether semiconductors and chips are the right thing to support in terms of industrial policy. But that's what the Biden administration is doing. They've left in place all of the sticks. They've left in place and they've improved on some of them. I'll give you one example, which, really used to rile me up and rile Elon up as well. it was a huge amount of investment and innovation and really smart, difficult times getting that gigafactory up in Nevada moving. And the engineers and the people there that have made that factory work and work spectacularly well deserve a huge amount of credit. But the Trump administration's 301 tariffs, which Biden kept in place for 3 years until they finally made some reasonable changes, had this inversion where all the inputs, any input you brought in from China was tariffed at 25% or more in some cases. But if you brought a finished battery pack into the United States, it was tariffed at 8%. So it was a incentive structure to continue to bring in battery packs from China. How dumb. Now, I don't think that this was like a purposeful thing by the Trump administration, but when we tried to correct it, we couldn't get it done. When we tried to correct it with the Biden administration, they said, absolutely, we got you. Yes, 100%. Nothing got corrected for 3 years. So it did finally happen. And
you summed up the Democrats, bureaucratic and slow,
Like
and
the
the
border.
Republicans.
I want to take the remaining 15 minutes here to talk about, I guess, lack of a better word, lawfare. So the relationship between Elon Musk and the parties. Many of the Republicans are very concerned that the Democrats are not supporting Elon, but also maybe even getting towards lawfare and completely harming Tesla and Elon. There's many examples of that. You know, the coastal California example. Literally, the guy said, you know, this is not right when it's not even under his purview. And then, of course, now that drove Elon to support Trump, and the belief that supporting Trump is going to be better for Tesla. What's your thinking on that?
Well, we could dedicate a whole episode to this, but here's a couple of points. Here's a couple of points. One is it's rich for me because I was in the middle. I never thought I would care that much about direct sales and service, right? But huge number of cases, and many of which were Republican attorney generals coming after Tesla repeatedly and in really ticky-tack ways, sometimes directly suing Tesla for operating. This is the case even today in Louisiana. This was the case in Texas. This was the case in a number of different states around the country. And so we had, this is one example of a place where, was it lawfare? I don't think so. It felt like it was just Republicans feeling, and not just Republicans, Democrats too. It wasn't just Republicans, but it was a case where some of these attorney generals and those that had close alliances with the Auto Alliance or the auto dealers were coming after Tesla. I never sat there and said, I have this grievance, and so now I'm going to come up with a political reason as to why they are screwing me over or screwing Tesla over or screwing our employees over. But that's, in fact, what they were doing. They were trying to prevent us from even selling the product into their state directly or servicing the product. In the case of Louisiana, they're not even allowing us to, they were not even allowing Tesla to service the product. Okay, so fast forward a little bit. You've got all of 420 take private stuff. And now, do I think that the SEC was at that time under some political pressure from Donald Trump or anyone else to like come down hard on Elon, remove him as chairman, fine the company, do some other thing? I don't think so. I mean, I can't imagine that Donald Trump was sitting in the Oval Office like directing that effort or telling the DOJ, really, come on, you got to go after Elon Musk. It's time to really get him. Or do I think that Donald Trump was sitting in the Oval Office telling the NTSB, as an example? At that time, Elon had a back and forth with a Trump appointee from the NTSB. Do I think that Elon was like, or that Trump was sitting there controlling in a sort of, really politically perverse way? I don't think so. I have no evidence of that. Doesn't make much sense to me. So, but I can create, if you want me to, I'm happy to create, here's this donor, and here's this family member connection, and here's some other connection to this judge here, and here's another connection to the SEC, and here's how this attorney general knows this person. And I mean, you can come up with a conspiracy theory for everything. But I don't believe that that's what was in Trump's mind. I don't think that he was trying to screw us over in any way or screw Tesla over. I don't think that was.
And
what
don't you think it intensified since Elon bought Twitter? Don't you think that there is a link, that there's been just much more political pressure on him? And especially, recently, the fact that they had the permission to launch more rockets from, talking about SpaceX here, from Vandenberg, and then suddenly that was cancelled, right? So, and actually, in explaining that, the commissioner who decommissioned this said it was because of many things that Elon is saying. So I do believe there's an item, and I'm not saying it's specifically against Tesla, but I think it's specifically against Elon.
Well, in that particular case, I mean, I saw some of the testimony. I didn't watch the whole thing. Certainly looked like a bore fest, snooze fest. By the way, you should be the one who always pronounces Vandenberg. That was an excellent pronunciation. Yeah, that one seemed bizarre at best, that the Coastal Commission was behaving the way that it was, and certainly a case of political malfeasance. There's a broader case that folks on X have been making about lawfare, which I did not buy into, and partially because of some of the examples I gave you, what I personally went through with similar folks. So I'm not saying that it's definitive, but I don't think it's particularly, I don't see it as compelling.
Okay, got that. If you don't mind, I want to move to one question. Let's pretend for a moment. I know you don't want that, and I don't believe it yet. So whatever. But let's just pretend we will have a second presidency of President Trump, and Elon becomes the efficiency czar in whatever function it will be. Do you think that would mean he has to give up any position within Tesla? Do you think there is a link? And or can, I mean, you know it from the public service side, can he be an advisor and still have his executive positions in the industry? Or even if he would become a cabinet member, would he then have to give it all up? How do you think about all that?
Oh boy. Okay, so there's a few things here. Yeah. There's a few things here. So there's a lot of advisory boards. Jeff actually yesterday was calling me out because I mentioned that, there's like 60 or 70 people, cabinet officials and national security advisors who are out against Trump and, saying that he's going to be a threat to democracy or all the other terrible things they've said about him. And Jeff tweeted out, there's 1,800 appointees and advisory people and lots of other. And so is it possible to be appointed to an advisory committee in some form or that are very formal and bureaucratic and get, I hate to say it, almost nothing done? I used to dread having to go to even to listen to or be there as a staffer for these advisory committees. So is it possible he could do that route? Yes, possible. I think almost nothing will happen. Is it possible he could go the next route, which is to be literally appointed in the White House as an advisor on the DOJ committee? That's also possible. Now, in the Trump administration, 17 to 21, they had I'll try to be kind about it. Ethics were not at the top of their list in terms of how they thought about, unencumbering the various different appointees from entanglements and potential conflicts. So, if I'm working at Tesla and also have a board seat at Rivian, might be a little weird. So can Elon work on things that have an impact to a business that he is literally the CEO of? I mean, it would defy any kind of ethical logic. It's
cleaning up government efficiency. What would that have as an impact on Tesla?
Well, it depends. Again, so if what you're talking about is permitting, regulatory reform, if you're talking about cleaning up the efficiency of how grant making is done, I mean, SpaceX has been over time one of, and of course, much more efficient, way better than their competition, but they have been a big beneficiary of major government grants. So any way you look at this, okay, so is it on the supply chain front? Is it on cleaning up government grant making? Is it on cleaning up regulatory processes? Is it on some other type of FAA reform, EPA reform, some other kind of reform? I mean, in some form, he's running many other businesses. So imagine, for example, he's launched into the HHS department, trying to figure out how to clean up our the way that we approve drugs and the way that we get. Well, he's got a company he's running right now. I think almost the entire investment comes from him. So can they get over all of those things without him getting, sort of either leaving the company in some form, divesting in some form? Again, anything is possible. Maybe they'll even write a new law. Congress will be able to pass a law that allows him to do something like this. But I think it's more likely that he will be in an informal advisory capacity as a volunteer. And the amount of power you have is, I think, similar to the amount of power he has anyways. I mean, what he says and how he says it and what he focuses his time on has a huge impact, period. Whether he's sitting in Oval Office meetings or not, if he's volunteering for the government in some form, even if it's informal, or advising Donald Trump on the side in some informal way, he can have a major impact. But like this whole thing about him going inside the government and shaking, I mean, that whole thing.
He would go crazy on top of it. I mean, you know it better than I do. Yeah.
It also doesn't make sense for investors. Like if you're a SpaceX investor, Tesla investor, or any of those other companies, I mean, I don't understand why anybody would. Don't you want his vision? Don't you want his management? Don't you want him being there? Why would you want him sitting in the damn government looking at HUD reform?
Yeah. No, I agree with you. Now, very ridiculous question. Go ahead, Jeff.
Can I make one comment? I think he's going to focus on the framework and the approach to, like, okay, is there too many people staffed in these organizations, or should these I think he's going to have a hierarchy of, like, should certain things exist and should certain things be regulated. But I think in terms of him making the specific decision of this one in, this one out, that's where it becomes a problem. But if he starts talking about, well, here's the hierarchy approach of, like, how we get more efficient, we start with, like, example, it's the same parallel of, like, should the part be in the design? You can put an engineer on a part and have him, perfect it for a year, but should that part even be in the design? So I think he's going to start with a hierarchy. And then once you get into, okay, this particular part of government, okay, it should exist. Well, is it right size? I think he's going to give them a process and an approach for how to do that. And I think there could be some rigor behind it. But the approach of, like, should this person or should this particular regulation be in or out? I think it's going to be more of the, if you add a regulation, do you reduce to, or then, like, what's the framework around it? What's the framework around permitting? I think it's going to be more about that. And I think he's not going to do it unless he can actually affect a meaningful outcome. So it's not going to be one of these things where he's just on periphery, like, talking and speaking. I think he's either going to engage where he knows he can actually have meaningful impact, or he wouldn't go all into it.
Yeah.
We'll see.
And that brings me to my to my last question, if you don't mind, and then give it back to you, Herbert. And this one is slippery and spicy, Rohan, so please forgive me. I know you're very close to the Obama teams, but if Elon would ask you under a Trump presidency to work with him on this efficiency team, is this something you could overcome your political adversity to Trump and do it for the sake of the nation? Or would you just feel like, no, thank you, I've given enough public service?
I mean, if Elon's asking you to do something, I would obviously listen and try to be as helpful as I could be. But I'm for all of the sort of non-Tesla related, non-clean energy related reasons that you've stated, Alexandra, I'm equally as disgusted by Donald Trump, and I can't see myself being undisgusted. I try to be as practical as I can, and I would try to do as much as I possibly could to help wherever I could, but it'd be hard for me to, yeah.
Well, good answer.
Yeah.
Sorry that I jumped in here, but go ahead.
Rohan, I just wanted to ask you a personal question from me. A lot of people are asking the same thing, which is, was it, from your comment, can you comment on, was it a misstep for the Democrats to treat Elon the way they did, attack him the way they did? I mean, it's almost at all levels here that it started and expanded from that.
I think it was a own goal of really epic proportions, and I think it was not really thought through in the right way, and it was one of those where a number of folks, I think, really understood how much of an own goal it was right from the get-go. That very first EV summit, of which there were multiple post-EV summits, it's like, when Trump didn't invite us to their Roosevelt Room meeting and subsequent meetings and all sorts of different stuff, it didn't feel that problematic because we knew what they were going to do. They were going to listen to Ford and GM and the auto industry, and they were going to do whatever they wanted them to do, basically. They weren't going to listen to us anyway, so it wasn't that big of a deal. We didn't care that much. It was hurtful for me personally because it was my realm, but it was not necessarily like stinging because we kind of knew what they were doing. In this case, literally the next day, the entire coverage was about Elon and Tesla. I mean, the Biden team knew that they had shot it in their own goal, literally from the moment go. And then they couldn't get themselves out of the damn problem. Like it was like they were in this toilet bowl and they just couldn't get themselves out of it, unfortunately. And so I think, when you ask that question, yeah, totally an own goal, totally an own goal. But I think it takes two to tango. So was it an own goal? Yes. Did it devolve deeper and deeper because Elon decided to really have fun with them? Also, yes.
Yeah. I was just wondering if we can get the name of the staffer that wrote in the Biden speech, Mary, you led the whole transition of the auto industry.
I know that person. They did not read. Okay. I know the speechwriter very well. They did not write that. And the explanation I got
on an exclusive, Herbert.
Yeah, yeah, I know him very well. He's an Indian guy, super sweet guy, awesome guy. He actually worked at the NBA before. Anyways,
all right, don't dox him.
He was so upset that, and so he called me. He's like, dude, I did not write this. It's like, no. I said, well, what exactly what was he talking about even? What does that even mean? It didn't make any sense. It was so stupid. And what a number of Biden people told me was he was referring to the fact that Mary Barra switched her allegiance from supporting the Trump era pollution regulations at EPA to supporting the Biden era pollutions at EPA. And so she led the push towards getting everybody on board with this EPA set of regulations. It's like, well, for God's sakes, if that's what he meant, if that is actually what he meant, he said it in the absolute worst way and it made no sense. So That's what their explanation was. It was a pretty weak sauce explanation, and they never really corrected the record. In fact, he said it again multiple. I think he said it at least one or two times more. So it wasn't like, oh, this was a mistake, let's correct it. No.
I mean, you're going to give it to him. He sometimes repeats stuff out of context again and again. So maybe it was just one of the cognitive issues he has.
Yeah.
Is this fixable, but I mean, Rohan? Can the Democrats turn around and just fix it? Or should they bother, or it will never be done?
No, 100%. They should bother. And do I think that it's fixable? 100%. Politics changes on a dime. I mean, for God's sakes, we've got Dick Cheney supporting a Democrat. I can't even believe I'm saying that out loud. It doesn't make any sense. The guy served multiple Republican presidents.
Keep him.
What? Yeah. Well, it's not like I want him. You guys can have him back in a second.
You guys have open arms. Just embrace him and like
exactly. You're so joyful and welcoming. Just keep him now.
I mean, you've got a Kennedy Jr. supporting Donald Trump, and you've got a Dick Cheney supporting Kamala Harris. So there's a wild set of things that happens in politics, and things change rapidly. When I first started at Tesla, guess what I was doing? I was working on an invitation from Nancy Pelosi to Elon to show up at the State of the Union. When I left Tesla, I was coming off of dealing with about 10 invitations from 10 different congressional members for Elon, Republicans, for Elon to sit next to them at the State of the Union. So,
and Nancy Pelosi became the best trader in the United States.
Yeah, that's right.
Herbert asked me this a couple of, like maybe a month ago, and I'm on a similar page. I do think things can change pretty quickly. It's just, Elon has gone really all in of late. And so, yeah, but I'm still of that of like, there just needs to be a breakthrough. And I think it can change, but man, right now it seems fairly deep and entrenched. And, but hopefully that, I agree with your overall sentiment of like things can change pretty quickly in politics. I tend to agree with. We see it.
Yeah.
Okay. Any last comments or questions?
I love you even more, Rohan. There's no doubt about it.
Hey, I give you guys a lot of crap on X, and you guys give me some crap on X, but that's fun. I like that.
Crossfire. But maybe we can have you back, but this time no more politics for me, but I'd love to hear more about how Tesla as an organization runs, things that you're able to share that's fair for us to, because that's what we're looking for, right? Efficiency, performance, how they succeed. Yeah, we'd love to do that. Thank you very much, Rohan. That was great. Again, great conversation. You taught us a lot, and same with Jeff and Alexandra. I learned a lot about both sides. Appreciate that very much. Folks, please stay online, and we're going to go to the next live stream talking about robotaxi, some new information that was just shared. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.
See you.